Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast. Our primary objective is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never quit. The reality of life is simple. We all fall. We all fail. At times, we get knocked down. The question is, do we get back up? Are we stronger? Are we better prepared to attain the maximum of our potential? Thank you for joining our No Quit tribe. As you go for your greatness today, never quit. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. Welcome to episode number 369 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is Tackle What's Next. Our quote of the day comes to us from Chris Gardner. One of the things young people always ask me about is what is the secret to success? The secret is there is no secret. It's the basics, blocking and tackling. With the holidays right around the corner, if you are looking for an uplifting and easy, quick read, we would love it if you took a look at our new book, The Positivity Tribe in the Locker Room. You can head on over to wherever books are sold, or you can go to thepositivitytribe.com. I really enjoyed speaking with our guest today. When I first learned about his new book through Ben Newman, I knew it was something that I was going to enjoy reading. From football, culture, and even discussing Kobe Bryant, Eric Wood absolutely delivers on today's episode, and then some. So make sure you grab a pen and paper, because I know you're going to enjoy listening to what he has to share with us today. Eric, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Yeah, it's an honor. Thanks for having me on, Chris.
Appreciate it. First question I ask everybody is, are you ready to positively impact at least one person today?
That is my daily mission. And so I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to hopefully do that through this podcast.
I think you definitely will. The first question I ask is for someone's typically their no-quit story, but I want to preface the first question to you. You had a crazy Joe Theismann break, ACL, MCL, and then a career-ending injury. And I was curious, how are you mentally able to maintain not only that no-quit attitude, but to move on to the next phase in both your career, but also in your life?
You know, a lot of it's perspective for me, and having that perspective that you're lucky to be in the NFL to, put yourself in a position that, yes, there's going to be setbacks in an NFL career, but I was so fortunate for the opportunity to be able to play professional football. I feel like my entire life has been defined by that no quit mentality, starting with only earning one scholarship offer to college and not even being a first string player as a junior on my high school football team, and then getting one scholarship offer to the University of Louisville, end up being a first round draft pick. And I had a number of injuries throughout my NFL career, a number of setbacks. I played in the longest playoff drought in all of professional sports. You want to talk about a no quit mentality? When you have meaningless games to end every single season until your last season in the NFL, if you quit, you're out of there. And I used to have that conversation with guys in the locker room. It'd be week 16, week 17, and these games have no playoff implications at all. We are eliminated. And many in the organization likely even want us to lose, so it improves our draft stock. But as players, you're judged by your film. They can cherry pick any single play they want to and define you as a player by that single play. And so I feel like a lot of my journey and my story is defined by that no quit nature. And so you asked about the injuries, and man, there's some soul searching when you do a Joe Theismann leg break, you do an ACL. I had 6 lower body surgeries throughout my NFL career. And so to be able to get back off the mat each and every time, I was blessed with incredible support around me from family, my faith, from friends, from support within the NFL organization that would all spur me on. It's easier to wake up each day with a proper mindset, a positive mindset when you have that type of sport in your life. And then when you have the perspective that you're blessed with this opportunity, you can impact others through that no quit mentality. I think that always drove me.
I think your story is incredible. And to your point about those setbacks, for me, one of the biggest parts I love about this show is getting an opportunity to talk to people that have had those challenges and those obstacles. And I often talk about this on the show that with social media today, I feel that so many people put their highlight reel, their best of the best. It's why SportsCenter is such a popular show, because it literally takes maybe 20 to 30 seconds of an entire game and you get the best of the best. But for me, it's uncovering those challenges and obstacles, and from the perspective of how did you get back up that time? How did you keep going? And I think your story really touches on it. And I wanted to jump into your new book, which by the way is fantastic. And for our listeners out there, if you're looking for a fantastic book, not just business, not just sports, but in life, I would definitely recommend Eric's new book. But I love the title is Tackle What's Next, which obviously play on words in regards to football. But I think it's the subtitle that really stood out to me. It's Own Your Story and Stack Wins and Achieve Your Goals in Business and in Life. What was the premise behind it, or was there just the concept of the idea that you wanted to have a book that touched on everything? And I'm curious how long it took you to get from the beginning to the end in the process.
Yeah, so I'll try and touch on all that. I'll start with the final piece. And from writing books, doing anything in life, you feel like the next time you do it, you could be a lot more efficient in it. And this was about an 18th month project, getting to publish date. Now, there's some dead time prior to publishing after it's completely edited and all that, but it was about an 18-month project. I feel like I could do it in about 6 now, but you only know what you know at that time. And for me, I never saw myself as necessarily an author a few years ago. Now, I've always been an avid reader. I'll say in the last 10 years, I've been an avid reader. I love personal development books. I love nonfiction books. I love biographies, autobiographies. I love learning about people. I just feel like you can learn from everybody in life. When my career ended, and we could touch on that story later, but when my career ended abruptly, I started a podcast called What's Next with Eric Wood to kind of pick people's brains, because you mentioned that everybody's going to face challenges in life. And I've always heard it said, you're either in a storm in life, coming out of one, or heading into one. No one is exempt from those storms in life that can knock you to your knees. Well, my story, while it might have been unique because it was my story of my career ending through a career-ending neck injury, so many people could learn from that, maybe take some perspective of it. I started this podcast and I just had so many incredible people pouring lessons into me, but most of them weren't sports. And so there is a sports nature to this book because a lot of it is fueled from my story. But the lessons I learned, where some of them maybe come from experience that I have, most of them came from mentors, podcast guests, and some of which you've had on your show as well, the John Gordons, the David Nurses of the world, the Ed Miletts, the Ben Newmans, a Junior Bridgman, who's the second richest NBA player of all time behind Michael Jordan. These lessons are passed along to you through this book. And it sounds maybe cheesy to say, but I almost felt selfish if I kept all that to myself and didn't compile it all together. I could have compiled it all into a website or blog post. I chose to write a book, and the feedback has been great from it.
You touched on like 400 things in that answer, and I love it. But it was early on in your book where you did share that quote about the storms, and I've heard different things along the lines, but I think it's so true. And I think people don't always look at it from the idea that it's okay to go through different storms in life. It's okay to have the highs, the lows, and those times where things are going well. But I think people don't look at it from the idea that these storms make you stronger. These storms make you better. These storms teach you lessons. And I really thought that was a really cool quote you used. But going back to your injury for a minute, for those that don't know Eric's story, I believe you were actually having a year-end physical and you made the Pro Bowl. So from the point of view, from the mindset was you were ending the season. You had to do this medical because you had to. It wasn't like you were in pain and you couldn't walk straight. And you were getting ready, I believe, for the Pro Bowl. So I understand your child was also going to be born, but what was it at that point, whether it was days or weeks later, that allowed you to take that step forward in such a positive direction? Because I think the way in which your career ended could have gone probably one of 10 different ways.
Yeah, and you see that from many professional athletes. In the NFL, the statistic has come out recently that 86% of NFL ball players are either divorced or broke within 5 years of exiting the NFL. And so yes, you're right. Not everybody can take their career ending, those setbacks, and run in the proper direction. And for me, you mentioned I wasn't walking in with a limp or anything. I was the only player on our team that had played every single snap that year, because in the NFL, you could be beating a team too bad and they take the starters out. You could be losing too bad. Your shoe could come untied. You could get dinged up. In the NFL, the injury rate is 100%. Some you can just play through and some you can't. And so I didn't miss a play the entire season. I signed a contract extension before the season. And so heading into year 9, I was never thinking, what am I going to do next after my football career? I was simply worried about, how do we break this playoff drought, which we did that season, and it ended up being a very special season. And I hit into exit physicals, ready to hit the road, ready to go back to Louisville, Kentucky from Buffalo, New York, drive my truck back there so I have it for the offseason and see my son born 3 days later. And instead of me training that next offseason to try and regain my status with the team and around the NFL, I'm now on a journey after finding out I have disc and bone sitting into C2, C3 in my spinal cord, that I can no longer play at all. Even with surgery, anything, I can't play again. And so that put me on a instant journey to figure out what's next for me. And it's never all sunshine and rainbows. We can talk about how adversity makes you stronger and you grow from that adversity, but that doesn't mean it doesn't suck. That doesn't mean it's fun to go through. You get that perspective on the back end of it by grinding out of those situations, because they're definitely not fun to go through. And so for me, it was a constant evaluation, much of which I detail at length in the book, of, okay, what am I gifted at outside of playing football, that I can figure out how I can use those gifts to then serve others, because ultimately that's what it's about. You earn a living, you bring in value by bringing value to others using your gifts. I don't care what you're doing. I don't care if you're cleaning up, if you're a waiter or waitress, if you're a CEO of a company, you're ultimately serving others and bringing value to others. And so I had to figure out how I can bring value to others, and then how I could, on a day-to-day basis, figure out a new routine, a new schedule that I was never used to constructing for myself. When you're an NFL football player, your entire week, months, even the offseason is structured so that you can peak at the regular season, peak at the Super Bowl, and hopefully win it all. Well, now that's all out the window. I had to do a lot of soul searching and a lot of inner work to get to that point where I could transition successfully.
I love how you talked about that inner work, and going back to what you shared earlier in the last response. At the end of that journey, it's the rainbows and everything's good, but it's during that struggle, during those challenges, where I think you really identify who you are. In your book, you touch on early on finding your gifts, and maybe a difficult question, but wanted to get your point of view for possibly a listener that's listening to this that is struggling with what he or she either wants to do or finding something that they love to do. Do you have a suggestion, or is there an exercise you've done, or maybe something that you could share in regards to someone who might be just struggling to identify or find their gifts?
I'll say this, it's often harder for us to see our gifts than others. So at times, the most valuable thing you can do is to simply ask those around you what they see in you. But then oftentimes, if we think back to maybe our childhood, what we like to do naturally, what lights us up on a daily basis, what we would do for free, that's often where you're gifted in life. We're drawn to exercise those gifts. And, for me, I love to play sports as a kid. Okay, well, sports is out the window. I also was drawn to talking about sports. I did a number of media gigs throughout my NFL career that weren't even paid. I had a radio show each week and all that. Well, okay, well, now I'm in broadcast media. I love having conversations with people. I love learning from people. Okay, I can transition into starting a podcast and doing interviews and sharpening those communication and interview skills as well. And so for those listening out there, if you're really struggling, you could take the tests online. You can think back to those things, but especially when you're at a low point in life, it can be hardest for you to see your own gifts. Ask those closest to you, and I guarantee they will be able to point out your gifts.
I think it's so important, and it goes to the concept I believe where you touched on quite a bit is mentors and coaches. And you talked about a coach by the name of Mac that you worked with, wanted to get your 2 cents on the value and the importance of identifying and finding and or ultimately getting a coach, because I think it's something that is so important. And I've had many coaches during my professional career, and just maybe there's a listener that is on the fence with hiring a coach.
So I was so used to coaching throughout my entire life through sports. Teachers are essentially coaching you through school and through curriculums. If you're homeschooled, maybe it's a parent that is coaching you in those regards. That's how you get better in life, and that's how you move the needle forward, is taking that coaching and implementing it. Well, as I'm transitioning out of my NFL career, it became very important to me that I needed feedback in my life. I was used to, as an NFL football player, even in practice, you go in after practice and you might be in the team meeting room around everybody, and the head coach is coaching the entire team based on the film. Then you break up into the offense, you get it again. Then you're in your offensive line room, you get coaching again, down to the most minute details, a 6-inch step maybe that's just off. And so all of that, I was so used to getting that constant feedback. Well, for the first time in my life, I'm not getting that feedback anymore. So I found it extremely valuable that as I'm transitioning and trying to make this next chapter even more fulfilling than this NFL chapter of my life was, that I need some coaching along the way, and someone who's been there before, someone who has been a successful dad or husband or businessman, or has a stable spiritual life, emotional life, whatever it may be. I want to take coaching from people like that. So even though I hired an executive coach, for those out there that can't afford that, or don't believe they can afford it at this time, even having an accountability partner in life, a friend that you trust and that you mutually want to grow, meet with them once a week, have a long conversation once a week, and figure out where you want to get to in life, and have someone that can hold you accountable to those things. Because if you're anything like me, maybe you're out there and you don't need that coaching. Well, I know I do, and there's many more like me as well.
Well, I believe everybody needs coaching in some way, shape, or form. But I love how you touched on it, because it's not about just the football coaching or the sports or the working out. We all have trainers and those things. It's about those other things. But I think somebody asked me a couple weeks ago when I was speaking at an event to break down an accountability partner. And I said, an accountability partner is the same thing as a coach. It's the same thing as a mentor. It's the same thing in many ways as a manager. Obviously, there's a little bit difference and variations, but it's somebody that you trust to hold you to a commitment, to a goal, to an objective. If it's at work, it's to a project. And I think the value in that is unbelievable in so many ways. And there are so many statistics about accountability partners, and the statistics in regards to accomplishing a goal. If you have somebody that you check in with, and there's so many fun variances of in person, virtual, once a week, once every other week. But the statistics don't lie, because if there's somebody that's going to help hold you accountable, I think the likelihood increases dramatically. And I think, and I'd love to get your 2 cents on this, but in today's day and age, so many people are more, I think, open to the idea of a coach, whether it's an executive coach, a business coach, because so many other people that are successful are, I think, in some ways being more vulnerable by sharing that, hey, I've had a coach, or hey, I've had a mentor, or I've been a part of a mastermind for the last 4 years. And I think a lot of people now are putting it out in the public, so people are really seeing the true value in getting help and guidance from people, because I feel success leaves clues, but I also feel that failure leaves clues. And if there's somebody that can help you shorten your runway, why would you not listen to him or her?
Yeah, there's a reason that Alabama football has about 3 different performance coaches they work with, and Nick Saban works with someone individually. The best of the best recognize that they need people to help figure out their blind spots. We may think we know it all, but there's often someone that's been a little bit further in the journey. Maybe they've studied in different areas of you, and they can help you along with that. And look, we're stronger together. There's a reason that group-based workout classes work so well, and that's because you get the accountability of showing up and seeing the same people, and then they can shoot you a text when you don't show up, and you get that nudge to maybe get back in there. As opposed to if you're working out at your house each day by yourself, you don't get that nudge, and maybe you skip a week and you don't have anyone prodding you along, pushing you along. And so for me, you're exactly right. This coaching platform has exploded, and for, people often point at maybe the one person that's doing it wrong or that hasn't been where maybe they're claiming they have been. But there's so many people out there that want to make it their life's mission to simply serve others and elevate them. And that's what brings them true joy in life. And if you do it, and if you buy in, like anything else in life, you can take yourself personally and your business, your game, whatever it may be, to that next level.
I could not agree more. Just listening to what you were saying made me think about something that I saw on social media probably within the last couple months, but it's this concept of self-made, whether it's self-made millionaire, self-made entrepreneur. And I think I used to not even really think about that, but somebody shared something that the most successful people are not self-made. They have had coaches, mentors, managers, parents, but it's the concept of, if I didn't come from a millionaire family, or, if I wasn't a trust fund child, that I had to make this all on my own. And in that regard, you weren't handed that. But the post I was talking about really broke it down. And it was really interesting to see the perspective that nobody really is ever self-made. Yes, you have to put the work in yourself. Going back to somebody like Kobe Bryant, nobody worked out for him. So when he was in the gym by himself, working at 3 a.m, 4 a.m, yes, he was doing that by himself, but he also had trainers. He worked with Tim Grover for many years. He's had, I don't know how many coaches and all those things. But I think the concept is yes, you have to do a lot of that work yourself. Yes, you're the only one who can lift those weights and do those other things, but it's the mentors, the coaches, the trainers, the masterminds, the family, as you said during your injuries, the support system that really and truly, I think, helps everybody become a better version of themselves.
Yeah, and Kobe Bryant wasn't saying necessarily that he was self-made, but to use him as an example, he comes from a supportive family that drove him to all those basketball tournaments, paid for him to go to those basketball tournaments. Even if it wasn't his own parents that were paying for him to go to those basketball tournaments, someone was providing those opportunities. Someone provided the jerseys on his back, the shoes on his feet. As you look back, yes, some are more self-made than others. You live in Greenwich. I'm sure you're surrounded by people that want to set up their children, or maybe themselves were set up, and maybe they have a little bit of an edge in life, maybe financially, than others. I would argue at times that can hurt you in your development as well, and can hurt your long-term progress. That being said, even those people aren't truly self-made.
Yeah, no, and I could not agree more. I'm a big culture guy, and you and I spoke about this offline. So have to ask, you played for Sean McDermott as a player, and being a big sports fan, and going back to the culture piece, he completely changed the culture of the Buffalo Bills, and he's had people that have coached with him that are now changing other teams. And being a diehard, as I mentioned, New York Giants fan, I think Dable's done a fantastic job. But I got to ask, was there one thing, or was it just a bunch of those little steps along the way that was what took Sean from really being able to take the culture and change it for the Buffalo Bills?
So I'll say this first and foremost. One of the things that sticked out to me the most when I think back of Sean implementing a culture in Buffalo immediately, he got rid of our top draft pick from the 3 previous drafts during training camp his first year. The outside public all assumed we were tanking. Well, that's the team that breaks the 17-year playoff drought, the longest playoff drought in all of professional sports. But to Sean, he would always talk about, if you don't have our type of DNA, we don't want you in the locker room. John Gordon talks about energy vampires, and Sean McDermott doesn't use those exact same words, but he does have John Gordon books behind his desk in his office. Sean is all about getting better each and every day. And he talks about the Kaizen model, which is a Japanese model for growth that basically says that it's not a straight line to success. There is going to be peaks and valleys, but as long as you're constantly improving each day, you're focused on that 1% better, eventually you will get to that desired destination. So Sean was all about process, and he drove the media wild in Buffalo talking about, we are just sticking to our process. And there's a lot that goes into that process. I remember we started that season 1-0, I believe, and then 3-1, and everyone thought we were tanking. Well, we lose that first game, and Sean said, well, we didn't yes, we lost on the scoreboard, but we only lose. This only hurts us in the long run this year if we don't learn from this. So then he would always talk about it. We either win or we learn. The only way we lose is if we don't learn from that loss, and we continue to get better and better that season. But I think when you're a leader, and I'm sure there's a lot of business leaders out there listening to this podcast, sports leaders, but also if you lead your family, if you're a parent, if you have a group of friends, you're leading those around you. So you can take this with you. Sean McDermott is the most consistent person I've ever been around, witnessed in my entire life. He is a very early morning guy. He is a workout at 4 something a.m. every single day so that he knows he gets his workout in. He gets his day started how he wants to. He gets his personal development reading, podcasting in the morning before his day gets going. Everything is structured. Everything is detailed out in his day. And that's even through the off season. Sean lives with such intentionality that when you're the head of the organization, when you're the person that everyone's looking towards, and you can live with that type of consistency and model that behavior, it's amazing how little the maybe words and the messaging around the facility means if the head coach or the GM isn't living those things out. But when they are, man, now you're doubling down on it. Now that messaging, that wording means a whole lot more when you're talking about core values of a culture, of an organization, of a sports team. When the head man is modeling that, it becomes very easy to follow his lead.
I think that last part you just shared is so powerful, because we all know teams and companies, schools, businesses where the leader or leaders are saying the right things, but then maybe they're not living those things. It's, work out hard, or hey, spend extra time, and maybe they're coming in the office at 9:05 or 9:10, and they're telling everybody else, get here early, get your morning started. But I think what you just shared about Sean is awesome. I've read a bunch about some of the things he does, but the thing that really stood out to me is the consistency perspective, because I think we're all familiar with the idea of perfection, and I think we all think about that perfect game or that perfect sale or that perfect meeting or that perfect date, fill in the blank behind perfect. But the reality is, perfection is not something that we should ever go after. It's not something that I feel is attainable. Going back to what you said about Kobe, I was a huge Kobe fan and a huge Michael Jordan fan. My opinion, the two best basketball players of all time, they both lost a ton of games. They both were championed with the game-winning shot on the line, and they missed multiple times. They both had season-ending injuries, but it's about coming back and learning from that. And I think what Sean has done with the Buffalo Bills, it wasn't day one. He didn't come in, in the summer, and then all of a sudden you guys went 16-0 in the first season. There was those small little things, but I love that piece you shared is either I never lose, I either win or I learn. And I know there's probably 500 different variations of that quote where it's credited to so many different people. But I think to your point is you only lose, in my opinion, is if you don't learn from something or if you just give up and quit. And I think it's the flip side of that is, how do you become better? And you go back to that, what you said as your DNA, and it's that 1% better every day. So I just feel like I got a PhD in Sean McDermott.
Let me add one more thing, Chris. I mentioned about Sean bringing in the guys with the right type of DNA. You want to change a culture of an organization or change a culture of a sports team, fill it with the right type of people. It becomes very easy to have a culture of competitive, let's call it a sports team, but it could be anything. You bring in guys that are tough, that are smart, that work hard each and every day. Those guys are going to get along together. They're going to enjoy playing together, and their film's often going to look different because of the way they play, because of the mutual respect that everybody has for each other. That's what the Bills have done. I mean, Josh Allen, to his detriment at times, lays his body on the line each and every week because everybody else is doing that. Why should I slide and take care of myself? This is his mindset, not mine. I'm telling him on the broadcast to get down, Josh, protect yourself.
I think he'll learn, by the way.
Yeah, they got a top 2 quarterback in the NFL right now that doesn't even slide most of the time, but that's the culture because they have a team full of tough, smart, competitive guys, and that's why the Bills are so hard to beat each and every week. You feel an organization, you feel a business, you feel a sales team with people like that, you're going to be tough to beat as well.
You touched on something that I think is really important, and I don't I don't want to gloss over for a second because I think it's really, really powerful. And as I said, being a big culture guy, I've had the opportunity to work with a bunch of teams and companies and a lot of entrepreneurs and sales teams. And one of the big, I think, disconnects, and I'd love to get your point of view on this, is you can't change certain people. You can make them better. You can make them more efficient, more effective. But if they don't have the right DNA, you can't take that square peg and just fit it through that circular piece. Now, I think in sports and in business, you can win a game. You can make a huge sale. But as far as winning the second and the third game and the fourth game and making that third, fourth, fifth, sixth sale, if you have those wrong people, you can't continue to get to that next level. And I think so many companies and even teams, they keep those, I don't want to say wrong people or bad people, but not the right DNA fit for that team or organization. And you fast forward a year or two, I feel that you're going to be on the same plane with the same results, because sometimes you have to exit those people off your bus. And I think the other point of view too is that it's beneficial for them as well. Is you're not fitting in my company or my team. I think in some ways, yes, I don't want you to leave. I don't want to lose you. But I also think if I could help you get to that next, or your next, what's next to your next company or team, where you'll be able to thrive. And I think everybody benefits, but you can't take that square peg and just nail it through that circular hole.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%. And especially when you're trying to set the culture, when you're trying to create a winning environment, you especially can't have those people in the building. Now, once you establish it, you talk about Bill Belichick and Tom Brady, the end of their time together. Yeah, you could add a few bad eggs in there because they're going to have to fall in line. And the average of the 5 people around them are going to bring them up. But especially early on in a rebuild, whether a rebuild or a startup, company, team, family, anything, having those right people early is critical.
I couldn't ask for a better transition. You'll get where I'm going here. So I know the quote, "You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with," by Jim Rohn. Have to ask you, if I could grant you dinner with any 5 people, dead or alive, that you could level up with, who would you pick as your 5?
5's a lot. Let me get rolling on this. Put Jesus Christ in there. Put Jesus in there. There's one. Man, when I think of people that could elevate me, I'm all about like success in all buckets of life. And so give me like a Tony Robbins as far as what he would bring to the table, maybe an Ed Milet, what he would bring to the table. Let's go athletics for a second. Dead or alive, man, give me a Kobe Bryant. And just a quick side note, while I halfway think about my 5th, man, I feel like Kobe Bryant, like I truly appreciated Kobe while he was alive. I hate the fact that I appreciate him so much more researching him and appreciating what he was all about after he passed. And I feel like that's a lot of people in life, in this journey. I mean, now I have a Kobe Bryant autographed picture right outside my downstairs office, but man, I just feel like I truly didn't appreciate him enough at the time. And then number 5, give me Tiger Woods. I aspire to be a better golfer, so you put him in there as well.
Well, fact, I can only become a better golfer. I don't think it would be possible for me to get worse. But going back to what you just said about Kobe, I was nodding. This is going to be only released on audio, but I was nodding as you were saying that. Literally over there, I have a Kobe picture, and then in my other office, I have 2. I have a Jordan and Kobe and LeBron, and then a Jordan and Kobe. I could not be more on the same page as you in regards to appreciating him more after. And I think a lot of the disconnect was early on in his career. He had some challenges, and a lot of people kind of wasn't sure what to expect. But then with the riff he had with Shaq, and then they came back and they won a couple championships. I think he was misunderstood in many ways, and I think his demeanor sometimes was quiet. But totally side note. But have you watched the new Netflix Redeem Team?
I have, and I've referred a lot of people to watch it, and his mindset with that and the way they embrace Coach K as a college coach stepping in to teach all those pros and work with them. I absolutely loved the Redeem Team deal. And yeah, I'm with you. In another note on that, it was also like his career peaked just before social media. I feel like we'd have so many Kobe Bryant quotes and memes and business advice and all of that if social media was roaring during the peak of his career, and people would have fully understood the commitment he was putting in. Now, I don't see Kobe Bryant as a, hey, I'm going to post every workout I have on social media, but there probably would have been people following him around with a camera at some point, so we could have pulled back the curtain, and then it wouldn't have to be a Tim Grover years later talking about him in a book or a podcast, or a Alan Stein Jr. talking about him in another speaking gig. It would have been chronicled more, I believe.
It's so funny you mentioned that. I had Alan on very early a couple years ago, and one of my mentors and real good friends, Bob Berg, had Alan on, and he was kind enough to make the introduction. But Alan's Kobe story is awesome, and I think to your point, he would definitely not have been the guy that was posting what he's doing at 2 a.m. He would be that guy that was just getting after it and doing it. And to your point, it'd be somebody else posting it, or someone saying, "Hey, I bumped into Kobe at 3 a.m." I had a couple weeks ago, I had Steve Wojciechowski on, the former Duke player, assistant coach, and Marquette head coach. That. He was on that staff for the Redeem Team, and offline, I spoke to him for about 5 minutes about that, and it was just really cool for him to be, but not to ruin the Redeem Team Netflix series. But he said offline that the story about what Kobe was going to do to Pau Gasol was absolutely true, and he said everybody was looking around the room like, "What is this guy, nuts?" Because they didn't think. And he was just like, "Look," he's like, "this is what's going to happen." And first play, and obviously he went ahead and did it. So,
well, and here let's circle back just for 1 second on a previous point we made, just to hammer it home even further. Kobe Bryant starts working out at 5 a.m. out in Vegas while everyone else is out partying. They run into Kobe Bryant as he's on the way to the gym, and then all of a sudden everyone else starts going to the gym at 5 a.m. instead of going out and partying. You talk about the alpha dog in that locker room was Kobe Bryant. They weren't sure if he'd even come play with them. He was the alpha dog. He's not looking to be friends with everybody. Well, that's who everyone looked up to in the locker room. Okay, well, he's modeling it, and then all of a sudden it transforms the culture and everyone's actions change as well. I just wanted to throw that in there because that was one of my takeaways from that documentary as well.
It's really neat that you mentioned that, because it reminds me, obviously not identical, but similar to the perspective of McDermott. You talk about leading by example and being consistent. Kobe was a loner in the sense of doing his thing by himself, but then he had that ability to lead by example. He wasn't calling or texting those guys at 6, 7 in the morning. He was just doing it. And the story in the show, when they're riding literally up the elevator while Kobe's working out, when they're just coming in from going out partying, that was to me was awesome, because when Jordan lost his when he came back and he lost the last game of the first season to the Orlando Magic in the playoffs, he was sitting with Tim Grover in the empty stadium, and Tim Grover, they were just quiet. And Tim Grover said in his book that usually Jordan takes about 7-10 days off, lets his body recover, and he gets to work. Tim Grover said after a couple minutes in silence, he looked over at Jordan and he said, you tell me when. And 5 seconds later, Jordan said, "I'll see you tomorrow morning first thing." And he led by example. Scottie Pippen started working out bright and early. Ron Harper started working out. The three of them, I think they called themselves the Breakfast Club or something. But his leading by example goes back to the Sean McDermott piece. We could talk for 9 hours about that, but I want to be respectful of your time. I want to change lanes here to what we call our hot seat questions. And the only request we have of you is that you spit out the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay, perfect.
Last meal. You can pick absolutely anything. What do you pick?
Sushi.
Favorite smell?
Skyline chili.
Other than football, favorite sport?
Golf.
Do you have an all-time favorite team?
I mean, the Bills, obviously now. I grew up a Bengals fan, and I'm a Reds fan as well.
Favorite movie?
Step Brothers.
I liked you before this. I like you more now. That is awesome. Do you have a favorite series that you've watched?
I'm enjoying Yellowstone right now.
Oh, have you watched the first episode of season 5?
We're about halfway through it. Me and my wife are pathetic. We get the kids down. It was about 9:15 last night, and we were about an hour into it, and we looked at each other like, we'll finish this up tomorrow. We're terrible, but I'm an early riser, and those after you get your stuff done during the day and you get in dad mode for a while, we're beat.
No, I could not agree more. Favorite book?
I have a lot, and I've read a bunch of them. The book I've gifted the most recently is probably The Carpenter by John Gordon. Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell is one of my favorites too.
Awesome. What is the favorite app you have and use on your phone?
I mean, the most used I would say is Instagram.
What's your background picture on your phone?
Uh, Me, my wife, and my kids. Me and my wife and my two kids, Grace and Garrett, and we're dressed to impress, heading to my sister-in-law's wedding and brother-in-law.
Do you have an all-time favorite quote?
Yeah, I would say our family mission statement is based on a Bible verse, Proverbs 11:25. He who refreshes others will be refreshed, and a generous person will prosper. At the bottom of my stationery that I sent handwritten notes on is a Jackie Robinson quote, and it's essentially a life's not worth living except for in the impact it has on others.
That is an awesome, awesome quote. During these challenging times, I think there's obviously the last few years have been difficult for many people, but wanted to see if maybe you could recommend one or two people on social media that really put out positive and uplifting stuff that perhaps our audience has not heard of or perhaps they're not currently following.
That's a great question. Ben Newman, if you're not following him, I think he does a great job. Maybe one you haven't followed would be Jordan Montgomery. It's a guy who's had a big impact on my life these last few years. He did one of the endorsements for the book. I admire Jordan. He has a lot of family content, but he's also a business coach, speaker, podcaster, and so to me it's a very fun and a very practical combination of family and then motivation.
Full and fair disclosure, I didn't know Jordan until I read your book. He's now scheduled. We connected on social media, so I owe a thanks to you without you even knowing that.
If you didn't have that teed up, I would have teed it up for you. One of the things I learned the most from Jordan Montgomery is everyone in this life wants to be connected with people. And Jordan always says, connected people connect people. Jordan's the best at connecting with other people. And then it's amazing how many people want to then connect Jordan with others. Now, when he's making those connections for me, it's never with the assumption that I'll return the favor. He's simply doing it because that's who he is. He's trying to bring value to others, but it's amazing how many circles he now walks in and leadership conferences that he's bringing to Iowa with John Maxwell and Craig Groeschel and John Gordon and all these people simply by serving them and connecting them to others.
That is awesome. So for our listeners that want to either connect with you, follow you, please tell them the best way to do that. But also, please plug both your book and your podcast so they can make sure that they, A, listen to your podcast, and B, buy at least 1 or 10 copies of your book.
Well, I appreciate that, Chris. And so I'm on Instagram and Twitter and all social media at ewood70. I'm most active on Instagram. If you hit me up on there, I can message you back. Unless I follow you back on Twitter, I won't ever see that message. You can't message me. So I like Instagram for that feature because you can connect with everybody on there. So at ewood70, my book is Tackle What's Next. That's available Amazon, Walmart, Target, everywhere they sell books these days. And then my podcast is What's Next with Eric Wood. I've been so used to plugging the book. What's Next with Eric Wood. And similar to Chris, trying to bring value to others. The range of people we have on goes from athletes to CEOs to pastors to anybody that we can learn from. And I really enjoy doing that.
That is awesome. I definitely recommend our listeners to not only check out his podcast, but make sure you grab a copy or two of his book. And then last question we have for you is the same question we ask everybody, is if you have any parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners today.
Yeah, I mean, on this topic of no quit living, if you're sitting out there in a storm right now, just understand that it's temporary. And if you're a person of faith like I am, I'll say God will use this adversity. You could think the universe, you could think whatever you truly believe in, but something good is going to come from this adversity. And it may not make sense to you right now. It may not make sense on this side of the grave, but something is great going to happen from this. Persevere through it, learn from others, dig yourself out of that hole. Many of the practices I talk about in Tackle What's Next, my book, but you can find that knowledge from everywhere. All that, none of that stuff I made up myself, but truly understand that, yes, this time in your life may be extremely difficult. By pushing through, by getting out to the other side of it, you're going to be able to use your adversity to make a huge impact on others.
I could not think of a better way to end today's podcast. So, Eric, I truly, truly appreciate it. Again, to our listeners, support, follow Eric, grab a copy or 10 of his book, and definitely check out his podcast. And I hope that you and I can connect again soon.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for having me on, Chris.
Thank you for listening to episode number 369. I've had the privilege of interviewing some incredible guests on my podcast, and Eric really delivered today. In his parting words, Eric reminded those of us that are currently in a storm right now to persevere because something good is coming from this adversity. So my challenge to you today is just that. Whether you're heading into or out of your storm, don't quit. Stay strong, persevere, and make sure that you make the best out of your adversity. And remember, we rise by lifting others up.
And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.